hear it, the wind moving over the Dnipro, slow and steady, like an old soldier whispering a warning. It carries the scent of water, stone, and something ancient, something that has watched this land rise and fall more than 1,000 years. And standing on the shore of that river, the guardians carved from time itself is a monument to the founders of Kyiv, 3 brothers and their sister, a family turned into legend. Their bronze faces, they look outward towards the wide horizon, as if they can see something coming. Their longship stands frozen in the moment, a Viking-style prow cutting through time itself. The metal, it seems to breathe when the morning sun hits it. The brothers grip their spears and bow, while their sister stands tall at the front, her dress flowing like a banner in the wind. They look like dreamers, but they look like warriors, and they look like Vikings. But the real question is the one history whispers. Who were they? Adventurers? Yes. Dreamers? Most certainly. Warriors? That too. But they were something older, something tied to the great seas and frozen coasts far to the north. Because long before Kyiv was called a capital, long before cathedrals rose from the hills, long before poets sang of this land as a mother, Viking ships sailed up the same river, chasing silver, trade, and destiny. Their ships cut into the Dnipro like knives of ash wood and iron, their boats pressed into the soil that you can stand on today. Their voices echoed across these hills, and slowly, side by side with Slavic tribes, they built something new, something strong, something that still shapes the world we live in. But this episode is not just about old stories for old books, not today. This one is for every Ukrainian listening, from a bus, a bunker, a village, a trench, or a kitchen where the power flickers when the sirens begin. To every soldier gripping a rifle with cold hands, to every mother standing strong for her children, to every young man and woman wondering how much more that they can take. Hear this. Your courage is ancient. Your strength was written into your people long before anyone could spell the word Ukraine. The same fire that pushed Viking ships up the Dnieper, the same heart that helped build Kyiv, it still burns inside of you. I pray that as you listen to this episode, that the war has ended and that the rebuilding has begun. Either way, let this episode be an encouragement to you in your present moment. Today we're traveling back more than 1,000 years to when Norse sails first rose on these waters, to where Kyiv was being forged, and to when new people, the Rus, were born. And make no mistake, Kyiv was Rus before Russia existed. This is not just a tale of Vikings. This is a story about identity, about roots, about a nation that has always stood strong between empires and has refused to vanish. This is the story of the Vikings of Ukraine. And when we're done, you may find that their spirit still walks the streets of Kyiv and Kharkiv, Lviv, Poltava, Ternopil, Vinnytsia, and beyond. The sea was calm the morning Marki left Birka. A thin mist rested on the water like a gray blanket. His long ship cut through it with a soft parting of the water below. Marki, he stood at the front, hands on the carved dragon prow, eyes full of hope. He was young, barely 18, but he carried himself like a man already chasing a future larger than the one he was born into. Where others were content to trade around the Baltic, Marki, he dreamed of something greater. He had heard stories, whispers, of a long river far to the east, a river that flowed like a highway of silver, leading to warm lands and to golden cities. He wanted to see it. He wanted to follow it. He wanted to carve his name along its banks. The wind, it caught their sail. The longship leaned forward and Marky smiled. The journey had begun. For days, the crew sailed east, passing dark islands covered in pine. The air grew sharper. The nights grew colder. Some men muttered that they had gone too far, that no riches lay beyond these empty coasts. But Marky, he held to the stories he had heard, stories of a river that connected the frozen north to the warm lands of the south. Then, one morning as the fog lifted, they found it, a narrow mouth of water twisting inland, pulling the sea into the earth itself. "The river," Marky whispered, "the river of the south." They rowed for hours. The trees rose tall on both sides like guards watching their passage. Birds called from the branches. Fish stirred beneath them. The river wound and brightened with the sunlight. The travelers, they traveled deeper and deeper still. And then Marky, he saw it. A bend in the river where the light struck just right, turning the whole surface into a sheet of glowing metal. The water, it flowed like molten silver through the endless forest, whispering secrets of the south. His heart pounded. This was the place. This was the path that would change everything. As they rowed further, they saw people on the shore. Slavic tribes with fur-lined cloaks and curious eyes. Some came forward with baskets of honey and grain. Others brought furs and dried fish. They could not speak the same language, but somehow that didn't matter. A laugh, a gesture, a smile. Trade had found its own voice. Marky, he traded an iron knife for a jar of sweet honey. One of the Slavs tapped the knife's blade on his chest and nodded with respect. Marky chuckled. Two worlds meeting, yet both they recognized strength. But not all days were peaceful. A storm rolled in, and without warning, black clouds swallowed the sky. The river turned wild. Waves slammed the longship into the rocks. Lightning cracked overhead. One of the smaller ships tipped sideways, filling with water before anyone could stop. Men shouted, cargo spilled, bodies splashed into the raging river. Marky jumped in without thinking. The cold hit him like a hammer. But he kicked hard beneath the surface. His hand brushed cloth, then a wrist. A boy, no older than 12, fighting for air. Marky grabbed him and pulled him toward the ship. Two crew members hauled them aboard. The boy coughed, shivered, and stared up at Marky with his eyes wide open. "Nikola," he said, pointing at his chest. His voice trembled. He pointed at Marky. "Marky," the young trader replied with a grin. Nikola smiled back. A bond had been forged, one that would shape the rest of Marky's life. The storm passed. The crew dried their gear. Nikola stayed close to Marky, showing him safe paths, sharing what he knew of the land. One evening, as the sky turned gold, Nikola, he pointed ahead. Smoke, it rose in thin lines from the distant hill. Not a campfire smoke. It was too much, too steady. "Kyiv," Nikola said quietly. A name spoken with pride. A name that sounded like the beginning of something huge. The ship rounded the bend, and there it was. A wooden fortress stood on the high cliffs, walls sharp and strong. Boats filled the riverbank. Smoke rose from forges and hearths. Voices carried across the water. Slavic, Norse, and other tongues that Marky had never heard. He spoke. "We found it. The great city on the river." The closer they came, the louder the world became. Hammers rang from blacksmith shops, merchants shouted prices, and children ran between the houses with baskets of bread. Dogs barked, goats bleated, Norsemen laughed near the docks, Slavic traders bargained beside them. A dozen languages mixed into one giant heartbeat. It smelled like a mix of fresh cut wood, hot iron, river water, and roasted meat. It felt alive, more alive than anything Marky had ever seen. He stepped off the longship and onto the soil of Kyiv. The ground felt steady under his boots, as if it welcomed him, as if it was ready for him. He looked around, taking in the noise, the movement, the promise carried on the wind. He came chasing silver, but he found a city that would outlast kings, kingdoms, and empires. Walking along the shore, Marky had entered into a world that was already changing, already shifting under the weight of something new. What he didn't know, what most of us forget today, is that the people who shaped the early Rus weren't just Slavic tribes alone. They weren't just traders or settlers or warriors. Many of them were Varangians, Swedes from the Viking Age who traveled far east, further east than any of their brothers. In fact, the oldest written story of this land, the primary chronicle written in Kiev, says something surprising, that the local tribes invited the Varangians to come rule them. Not to conquer, not to enslave, but to bring order. The chronicles describe it this way: "Our land is great and rich, but there is no order in it. Come, rule over us." Whether every detail is literal or legendary, the truth behind it is clear. The Vikings were not just visitors, they were part of building a nation. The first great name we hear is Rurik, a Swedish leader who settled in Novgorod around 862. He became the founder of the ruling dynasty that would last centuries. After Rurik came his kinsman Oleg, a man who was known for strategy and vision. Oleg looked at a map of rivers, trade routes, and tribal lands, and he saw something others had missed. He saw that the greatest city of the future would not be in the north, but it would be high on the hills of the land where Marky had been, Kyiv. Oleg marched south, seized Kyiv, and he declared it the mother of the Rus. And he was right. Kyiv became the beating heart of a young nation where Slavs and Norse became something special. Now, imagine the map of Europe 1,000 years ago. Snow-covered forests in the north, deep rivers running south, carving through the land like blue snakes. The Vikings didn't walk across Europe, they sailed through it, following rivers like the Volga and the Dnieper, running from Kyiv to the Black Sea. They found a way to link it all: Scandinavia, the Baltic Sea, the Dnieper River, the Black Sea, and Constantinople, the greatest city on earth at the time. This highway of rivers turned Kyiv into the crossroads of the world. On these waters, Norse longships carried furs, amber, honey, slaves, weapons, and silver coin all the way from the Muslim Caliphate. Silver was life, silver was power, silver kept the ships moving and the warriors loyal. And the Dnieper, it was a river that carried it all. The Dnieper runs through the heart of Ukraine. But the river wasn't always easy. The Dnieper had deadly rapids, places where the water tore ships apart like paper. The Vikings had to do something almost unbelievable. They dragged their ships over land. Imagine it, 12 men pulling a longship across dirt and stone. Maybe oxen straining and pulling, shields scraping sweat mixing with dust, and all around them, dangers in the trees, raiders from the shadows watching for a chance to strike. These treks were backbreaking, terrifying, and legendary. But they made the route possible, and they made Kyiv rich. As the years passed, Kyiv grew into a shining center of trade and diplomacy. You can picture it: Viking traders, Slavic farmers, Greek merchants, Jewish traders, Byzantine ambassadors, and warriors mounted on their horses. Iron, silver, and gold, axes, icons, and grain, shields, scripture, and a new way of living. Kyiv was where the worlds collided and where the new world began. This was not a small settlement anymore. This was a capital, a city of noise, life, markets, faith, and power. And ruling over it were the names that still echo today: Oleg, Prince Igor, Princess Olga. Many of their stories are fierce, surprising, and sometimes very brutal, but they set a foundation for a nation that would shape Eastern Europe for centuries. Before Christianity arrived, the early Rus lived in a spiritual world where two traditions walked hand in hand. Norse pagan gods like Odin and Thor, Slavic deities tied to forests, water, storms, their ancestors. It wasn't one faith or the other. It was a blend. It was a mixture of both. But in the turn of the century, everything changed. Vladimir the Great, ruler of Kiev, he looked at the world and he made his decision that would change history forever. He chose Christianity. Not the Western kind, but the grand, golden version from Byzantium. A faith of mosaics, hymns, and shining domes you can still see in Ukraine today. When he brought Christianity to the Rus, it didn't replace courage, it refined it. It didn't erase the warrior spirit, it redeemed it. From then on, men marched into battle with a cross on their chest and often on their shield. And their shields have a lot in common with the shields of the Viking Age. Faith was married to bravery. Strength was married to wisdom. And Kiev became the place where this union shaped a people for generations. The roots of the Rus, they weren't simple. They're not purely Slavic, they're not purely Norse, but they were something new. Something forged in fire, river water, and the mixing of cultures. And through it all, one fact remains. Kiev was the cradle, the crossroads, the beginning. When the Varangians first arrived, they came as travelers, adventurers, and sometimes fighters. But within a few generations, something remarkable happened. They were no longer outsiders. They had become part of the land, part of the people, and part of the story of Ukraine. This transformation didn't happen overnight. It happened in language, leadership, in battles, through marriage, and in the daily work of building a new civilization. You can see it even in the words. When the Norse settled among the Slavic tribes, they didn't share just land, they shared language and words for leadership, rule, and authority. They crossed from Norse mouths into Slavic speech. Over time, these words changed shape, softened, and became local, but their roots remained in the north. And that matters because language isn't just sound. Language is identity. It's how we remember. It's what we inherit. The Norse brought structured ways of ruling, trading, and settling disputes. The Slavs brought deep local tradition, strong community ties, and a connection to the land. Together, they built a system of laws that protected merchants, honored agreements, and created order. This blend helped Kiev grow, not just into a busy trade stop, but into a powerful, lasting center and the foundation of the Rus world. Further south, there, in the great palace of the Byzantine emperor, served one of the most elite military units in the world, the Varangian Guard. These warriors were Rus and Northmen, towering figures with long axes, iron helmets, and reputations sharper than their blades. They didn't guard the walls. They didn't guard the city. They guarded the emperor. The Byzantines trusted them more than their own soldiers. Why? Because the Varangians swore an oath so strong that it echoes through centuries. Loyalty until death. To betray that vow would be to betray their very soul. This loyalty became famous. Kings wrote about it. Emperors paid for it, and their enemies feared it. When the emperor walked into the church, the Hagia Sophia, the Rus warriors stood behind him like living pillars of iron. Ukrainian land connected to the greatest empire in the Middle Ages through courage, honor, and the ability to wield a two-handed axe. Amazing. The Varangian Guard wasn't just a footnote in history. They were proof that the Rus were to be respected across the continents, across centuries. By the 10th and 11th centuries, Kiev wasn't a frontier town anymore. It was a giant. Travelers compared it to Constantinople. Merchants said its markets were endless. Chroniclers described its beauty and awe. Kiev was where the worlds met, with a Slavic heart wrapped in Norse courage and tied to Byzantine glory. It was not a copy of anything else. It was original, it was bold, and it was independent. It was beautiful. It was Ukraine. And here's the question historians still wrestle with. Were the Rus truly Viking, or had they become something new? Did they remain Norsemen at heart? Did they become Slavic just in soul? Or did something different rise from the riverbanks of the Dnieper? When two worlds mix, which blood runs the strongest? Well, the answer, it's not so simple. But maybe it's not supposed to be. Maybe the power of the Rus wasn't in choosing one side or the other, but in blending both into something stronger. Norse bravery, Slavic endurance, Byzantine wisdom, all of it flowing together like the rivers that met into the wider one that became an unstoppable current. And that brings us to something important, something that is more modern. Because when we ask what identity survived, what culture thrived, and what memory remained, we find the answer here. Kiev. Kiev endured. Kiev grew. Kiev became the soul of the East. And maybe that's the beauty of Ukraine. It has always been a bridge between worlds, never a shadow of some other land. Through centuries of conflict, invasion, and changing empires all around, this land stood strong. Not because it was purely Slavic, not because it once touched the north, but because it carried the strength of both and more. Let's return to Marky and see how his story unfolds. Years passed, like river water, quiet at times, roaring at others. Marky was no longer the eager Swedish trader who had followed the stories of silver into the unknown. Life had carved him into something steadier, wiser, and far more rooted in the land than he ever expected. Under Prince Oleg's rule, Marky rose quickly. He had a talent for reading people, understanding danger, and leading men with calm courage. Soon, he was a commander, one trusted with both trade missions and the defense of key river ports and inland strongholds. Marky didn't stay because of Oleg or the glory from battles or for silver alone. He stayed because Nikola, the boy he saved during the storm at the outpost just north of Kiev, the boy brought Marky to his village one spring afternoon, and there, carrying a basket of apples and a shy smile, stood Nikola's sister, a young woman named Anya. She had dark hair, bright eyes, and strong hands that knew the land better than Marky ever would. She laughed softly when he tried to speak her language, and he corrected him with patience. Her family welcomed him with bread and warmth, and Marky found himself returning again and again. In time, he married her. They built a small home near the riverbank. 2 children came, 1 boy, 1 girl. They worked the soil that would one day belong to a nation still unborn. Marky's life was once about chasing riches, and now it was about something deeper. Belonging. One autumn afternoon, a Byzantine missionary came to Kiev. He wore long robes of blue and gold. He carried scrolls, icons, and a voice that spoke with gentle confidence. He showed the people images of Christ, bright, soft, full of sorrow and hope all at the same time. Marky watched from the back of the hall as the missionary spoke of peace, forgiveness, and a kingdom not built by swords, where death is no more. It stirred something in him that he didn't expect. For nights afterwards, he sat by the river thinking, was he still a Viking at heart? Had he become Rus? Was he just a foreigner in the land? Or was he a husband or a father? He wrestled with who he was. And then he asked, what does it mean to become a Christian? He had crossed vast seas, navigated winding rivers. He had fought in many battles and survived. But now wrestling with what does it mean to become a Christian? To cross a river so impossibly wide that it would change his soul and his identity. Anya sat beside him one evening, resting her head on his shoulder. You're not choosing one or the other. Look at our children. They are both of us. They are a better version of us. You will still be you, but you will be more you than you were before. Her words settled and became a gentle breeze that filled his sail. to move forward. But this peace, it didn't last forever. Fierce warriors from the wide open plains, they came fast and they came without warning. Their horses shook the ground and their arrows filled the skies. Their horses thundered towards Kyiv. Marky gathered his men, both Norse and Slavic, and some of them they carried axes, others spears, some rode on horses, some wore Norse helmets, and others had leather caps. But they formed a shield wall and they stood as one. The clash was brutal, shields splintered, horses screamed, the skies filled with dust and cries of battle. Marky fought at the front, swinging his axe in wide arcs. Beside him, always steady, always loyal, fought his wife's brother, Nikola, the boy that Marky saved. He was broad-shouldered now. He was brave, and he was quick with a sword, and he was even more deadly with a bow. During the battle, an enemy horseman charged Marky from the side. In the chaos of the attack, it was sudden, and it was deadly, and Marky didn't see him. Nikola did. With a shout, he pushed Marky aside and took the blow, a spear sinking deep into his chest. Marky caught him as he fell. Nikola, breathing, it slowed, and his hands trembled. Marky whispered, "You saved my life." Nikola tried to speak, but only managed a weak smile before the light faded from his eyes. The battle ended. The invading army had retreated, and the Rus, they held their position. But Marky felt hollow, empty. In the silence, he understood the cost of freedom. A free Ukraine is held together by the lives of its fallen heroes. They buried Nikola on a small hill overlooking the Dnieper. The river moved quietly below, as if mourning with them. Marky placed 2 carved wooden figures, a Norse dragon and a Slavic falcon, on the grave, a symbol of 2 worlds coming together. He rested his hand on the mountain of earth. Marky whispered, "I owe you a debt I will never be able to pay. This land owes you." Anya wept beside him. Their children held her hands. Their daughter asked innocently, "What do we do now?" Anya responded, "Now we say, Slava Ukraini, Heroyam Slava." That means glory to Ukraine and glory to her heroes. Years later, Marky stood on a high hill above Kiev. Much older now, gray on the edges of his hair and his beard streaked with white. The city had bustled beneath him. New churches rose, their domes catching the sun. Markets filled the streets, smoke curled from chimneys, boats lined the riverbank, all pointing towards destiny. The city had more than doubled in size since the day he first arrived. Marky watched the Dnieper flow, steady and shining, carrying the stories of every tribe, every trader, every dreamer who ever trusted its waters. He realized then, he didn't just discover a river, he didn't follow a trade route, he didn't just survive, he helped build something that would last beyond him, a people, a culture, a home. He came as a Viking, he stayed as a Ukrainian, and he looked out over Kiev from the highest hill on the west bank of the Dnieper, and he spoke aloud, "This is Kiev, the mother of Ukraine. May she protect her children, and when the time comes, may she unite them to stand tall." Marky smiled, for this was the land he chose, the land he fought for, and the land that had become his own. When we look at Ukraine today, its courage, its stubborn hope, its unbreakable heart, it's easy to think that these qualities were born only in the last few years or decades. But history tells a different story, a deeper one, a story written long before borders, armies, or modern nations. Archaeologists have uncovered Viking graves, ruins, weapons, and silver hoards across Ukraine from Chernihiv to Kiev. They found Norse-style brooches beside Slavic pottery. They found long-ship nails buried in the earth. They found stories carved into bone and wood. There is no doubt the Vikings were here. DNA studies confirm what legends have always hinted at. Some Ukrainian families still carry markers of Norse ancestry. blonde hair, certain bone structure, even genetic clusters found today that mirror those of ancient Varangians. But the most important inheritance isn't the blood, it's the heart. The same courage that pushed longships across the Baltic, the same resolve that helped build Kiev into a shining center of trade and power, the same spirit stands today on the battlefronts of this war. The same fire that once faced storms, raiders, winter, and empires now faces drones, missiles, and overwhelming odds, yet they refuse to break. Ukraine has always been its own nation, its own culture, and it has its own soul. And if the past teaches us anything, it's this: Kiev was the birthplace of the Rus. Let me take a moment to speak directly to those in Ukraine. So no matter where you're listening, whether it's from the trench or from the basement during an air raid, from a quiet cafe where the lights flicker when the power shifts, hear this: you belong to a long line of brave people with roots that run deep. A heritage that stood its ground, fought when it had to, and refused to bow. You come from a people that built cities, forged alliances, and shaped an entire nation. You are not forgotten, you are not alone, and you are not weak. You come from warriors who carved their destiny from ice and iron. Stand tall. Your story didn't begin with war. It began with greatness, and that greatness still lives in you. And when we look back at the Viking Age and its impact on Ukraine, the traders, warriors, families, and builders who shaped the early Rus, their story gives us more than history. It gives us wisdom for today. First, courage. Courage to journey into the unknown. The Vikings, they didn't know where the Dnieper would lead them. They didn't know if its rapids would break their ships or foreign tribes would even welcome them. But they went anyway. True faith, true freedom, and true purpose are often found on waters we've never sailed before. Courage begins with one step towards the horizon. Second, unity forged through diversity. Norse and Slavic blood didn't clash, they blended. They built a nation stronger than either people could have made alone. Their strength was partnership. A reminder that some of the strongest bonds are created when different worlds choose to work together as one. And third, leadership. Leadership that builds, not conquers. The greatest rulers of Kiev weren't the ones who raided most fiercely. They were the ones who built laws, markets, homes, and hope. Greatness isn't measured in plunder. It's measured in what endures after you're gone. From the icy fjords to the golden domes of Kiev, the Norse of the Viking Age left more than runes, silver, and bones. They left a heartbeat that still echoes through Eastern Europe. So to everyone listening, carry this story forward. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. And if this story stirred something in you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to the podcast. Leave a review. Those two things help this podcast more than you could know. And it helps this podcast reach further than any one person could take it alone. And I encourage you, come back next week because there are more sagas, more connections, and more truth waiting to be uncovered. And as always, be bold, be strong, and awaken the Viking in you.